Oops. Smile. Shabbat Shalom. Page 131. Ladonai. Ladonai. Shiru Ladonai, Shir Hadash. Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Hu Shemo. Basru miyom leyom Yeshuato. Sapru v'goyim kevodo. Bechol ha'amim nifleotav. Ki gadol Adonai u'mhulal me'od. Narahu akol Elohim. Shiru Adonai, Shir Hadash. Shiru Adonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru Adonai, Baruch Hu Shemo. Basru miyom leyom Yeshuato. Ki kol Elohei ha'amim elilim b'Adonai shamayim asah. Od v'hadar lefanav, oz v'tifaret b'mikdashav. Shiru Ladonai, Shir Hadash. Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Hu Shemo. Basru miyom leyom Yeshuato. Shiru Ladonai, Shir Hadash. Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Hu Shemo. Basru miyom leyom Yeshuato. Ladonai. Ladonai. Ladonai.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
I'm Rabbi Leah Berkowitz. This is our cantorial soloist, Rebecca Schwartz. We have Gerline in the booth over there, and we want to welcome everybody in the room and at home. It's nice to feel surrounded by people as we celebrate Shabbat. So let's take a moment to turn to someone beside us and behind us and wish them Shabbat Shalom, especially if there's someone you don't usually see. This is called Earthworms by Lynn Unger. Imagine the only thing that God requires of them is a persistent wriggling, moving forward, passing the earth through the crinkled tube of their bodies in a motion less like chewing than like song. Everything they encounter goes through them, as if sunsets, drugstore clerks, diesel fumes, and sidewalks were to move through our very centers and emerge subtly different for having fed us, looser somehow, more open to the possibility of life. They say the job of angels is to sing to God in serried choirs, perhaps, but most jobs aren't so glamorous. Mostly the world depends on the silent chanting underneath our feet. To every grain that enters, welcome. To every parting mote, be blessed. We continue with our service with candlelighting on page 121. We are celebrating a bat mitzvah this weekend, this Shabbat, which is so exciting. So we're going to invite Sierra Horn up with her parents, Melissa and Alex, to bless our Shabbat lights. Read one of these three. This one.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we be our lives give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own way, be among those who kindle light.
That's okay. You can just let. Yeah. You just need to read one of them.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher hirshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner Shel Shabbat. Page 648.
Oh, you forgot your purple.
Third song down. Going to continue on the Sing Unto God a New Song theme. Wrong capo. Let's try that again. That's going to be way too high for you and me. Here we go. Shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz. Shiru l'Adonai shir chadash. Shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz. Shiru l'Adonai shir chadash. Sing unto God, all the earth, a new song. I will sing unto God a new song. Sing unto God and we'll all sing along. All the earth, a new song unto God. Shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz. Shiru l'Adonai shir chadash. Shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz. Shiru l'Adonai shir chadash. I will sing unto God a new song.
Page 127. We pray responsively. There are days when we seek things for ourselves and measure failure by what we do not gain. On Shabbat, we seek not to acquire, but to share. There are days when we exploit nature as if it were a horn of plenty that can never be exhausted. On Shabbat, we stand in wonder before the mystery of creation. There are days when we act as if we cared nothing for the rights of others. On Shabbat, we remember that justice is our duty and a better world our goal. So we embrace Shabbat, day of rest, day of wonder, day of peace. We continue on page 138. Lecha Dodi.
We'll be doing verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. When we get to 9, please rise, and we face the west, where eventually the sun will set, and Shabbat will arrive. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Shamo v'zachor b'dibur echad, Hishmi'anu el hamiyuchad. Adonai echad u'shemo echad, l'shem u'tiferet v'litehila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki mekor haberacha, merosh mikedem nesucha, sof ma'aseh b'machashava techila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Hidareri, ki ba'orech kumi ori, uri shir daveri, kevod Adonai alayich nigla, boi v'shalom ateret ba'ala, gam b'simcha u'v'tzola, toch emunei am segula, boi chala, lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela.
Page 146, we remain standing for the Baruch Hu.
Baruch Hu et Adonai hamevorach, Baruch Adonai hamevorach le'olam va'ed. Hamevorach le'olam va'ed.
Page 148. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, bechokma poteach she'arim, uvitvuna mishane itim, umachalif et hazmanim, umisader et hakochavim, b'mishmerotehem barakia kirtzono, borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, bechoshech mipnei or, uma'avir yom umevi layla, umavdil ben yom uven layla, Adonai tzvaot shemo, El chai v'kayam tamid imloch aleinu leolam va'ed, Baruch ata Adonai, hama'ariv aravim. Page 151. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery. Baruch ata Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed.
You may be seated. We now call Sierra Horn to the bima to lead us in Ve'ahavta on page 154.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavecha ubechol nafshecha ubechol me'odecha v'chayu hadevarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinatam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'beitecha ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיהם. אני אדוני אלוהיהם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיהם.
Adonai Elohechem, Amen.
That was beautiful. Page 157. You did great. In a world torn by violence and pain, a world far from wholeness and peace, give us the courage to say, Adonai, there is one God in heaven and earth. The high heavens declare your glory. May earth reveal your justice and your love. From bondage in Egypt we were delivered. At Sinai we bound ourselves to your way. Inspired by prophets and instructed by sages, time and again we overcame oppressive forces. Though our failings are many and our faults are great, it has been our glory to bear witness to our God, keeping alive in dark ages your vision of a world redeemed. Let us continue to work for the day when the nations will be one and at peace. Then shall we rejoice as Israel did, singing on the shores of the sea.
מי כמוך בעינים אדוני, מי כמוך נדע בקודש, מי Adonai, mi kamocha neda bakodesh. Nora Ayam lifnei Moshe Miriam, ze Elianu ve'amru, ze Elianu ve'amru, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha neda bakodesh, mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai. Mi kamocha neda bakodesh. Nora Oseh, Nora Oseh, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. V'rema kifad Adonai et Yaakov, u'gelam yad chazak mimenu. Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu leShalom, v'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu leShalom, v'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Ushma tzedkeinu, u'moeinu, lechaim u'shalom, me'ata ve'ad olam. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu leShalom, v'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu leShalom, v'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat, la'asot et haShabbat ledorotam, berit olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat, la'asot et haShabbat ledorotam, berit olam. Uvein b'nei Yisrael, oti le'olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat, la'asot et haShabbat ledorotam, berito. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat, la'asot et haShabbat ledorotam, berit olam.
Ki sheishet
yamim
asa Adonai et hashamayim
et haaretz.
V'shamru
השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם, ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם, ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם, בריתו. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם, ברית עולם.
We are a people in whom the past endures, in whom the present is inconceivable without moments gone by. The Exodus lasted a moment enduring forever. What happened once upon a time happens all the time. Page 164, we rise in body and in spirit for the tefillah.
Ananana svatai tiftach, ananana ufi agid tahilatecha, baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, Ve'konei hakol, V'zocher chasdei avot v'imahot, U'mevi geula livnei v'neihem, Lema'an shemo be'ahava, Melech ozer u'moshiach u'magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, ve'ezrat Sarah, Atah gibor le'olam Adonai, mechaye hakol atah rav lehoshia, morid hatal, mechaper chayim bechesed, mechaye hakol berachamim rabim, samech naflim v'rofei cholim, umatir asurim, umekayem emunato lishenei afar, michamocha ba'al gevurot, umida melach, melach memit umechayeh, umatzmiach Yeshua, v'ne'emanat al hachayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, mechayeh hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, u'kedoshim b'chol yom yehalelucha selah, Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh.
You may be seated. We're at the bottom of page 172. Our God and God of our ancestors, be pleased with our rest. Sanctify us with your mitzvot and grant us a share in your Torah. Satisfy us with your goodness and gladden us with your salvation. Purify our hearts to serve you in truth. In your gracious love, Adonai, our God, grant as our heritage your holy Shabbats, that Israel who sanctifies your name may rest on it. Praise to you, Adonai, who sanctifies Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh ha-Shabbat. Find favor, Adonai, our God, with your people Israel, and accept their prayer in love. May the worship of your people Israel always be acceptable. God, who is near to all who call, turn lovingly to your servants. Pour out your Spirit upon us. Our God and God of our ancestors, on this, with the month of Sivan about to begin, be mindful of us and all your people Israel, for good, for love, for compassion, life, and peace. Remember us for well-being. Visit us with blessing. Help us to a fuller life. Let our eyes behold your loving return to Zion. Blessed are you, Adonai, whose presence returns to Zion. Baruch atah Adonai, hamachazir shechinato l'Tzion.
Page 176. Modim אנחנו לך, שתהו אדוני אלוהינו, ואלוהי אבותינו, ואמותינו, לעולם ועד. צור חיים ומגן אישנו, אתה הוא לדור ודור. צור חיים ומגן אישנו, אתה הוא לדור ודור. אנחנו לך, שתהו אדוני אלוהינו, ואלוהי אבותינו, ואמותינו, לעולם ועד, לעולם ועד.
When we behold your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and stars that you set in place, what are we humans that you are mindful of us? We mortals that you take note of us. You made us little less than divine, adorned us with glory and majesty. You gave us dominion over your handiwork, laying the world at our feet. How majestic is your name throughout the earth.
Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha, ulecha na'eh lehodot. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim le'olam. Ki atahu melech adon lechol Shalom, ki atahu melech adon lechol ha-shalom. Everyone, Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim le'olam. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ומחושה בשלומך שלום רב הישראל עמך תשים לעולם שלום רב הישראל עמך תשים לעולם ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום.
Please take a moment for silent prayer.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן ואמרו אמן ואמרו amen.
We pause in the heart of our service to offer a prayer for those in our community who are ill. This week we are thinking of David Harrison, Barry Cohen, Joe Crinty, Rita Siegel, Stephen Witt, Jerry Klebanoff, Sylvia Fishbein, Ruth Cohen, Marjorie Backup, Angela Barry, and Alex Denon, Eric Schwartz, Richard Oder, Matt Schaefer, Richard Barry Perlman, Paul Friedman, Chuck Katz, Lynn Katz, and Rabbi Heather Miller. If you'd like to add a name to this list, please do so now.
Judy Lascotti, Cheryl Blumenthal, Pat Rudden, and Joanne Hirsch.
B. Langman.
Jill Horn.
My friend Judy.
We hold all of these names in our hearts as we offer a prayer of healing.
Page 76 in our songbooks, top of the page. Refuat HaNefesh, Refuat HaGuf, Refuat HaNefesh, Refuat HaGuf, Refuat Shlema, Refuat Shlema. I sing these healing words for you. I sing these words for you. Refuat HaNefesh, Refuat HaGuf, Refuat HaNefesh, Refuat HaGuf, Refuat Shlema, Refuat Shlema. I sing these healing words for you. I sing these words for you.
And just as we share life's difficulties, we also share life's joys. Is there anything we are celebrating today? A birthday, an anniversary? We're going to get to you in a second. Birthday, anniversary, visitors, any other happy occasion? Yes, Joel.
Well, last night and today we saw friends who have flown the coop down to Florida, and for the first time in a year,
Yeah.
and that was really great. But while we were out today, our daughter Miriam texted us, telling us that in somewhat muted terms, she had won the biggest case of her career.
Oh, wow.
And she explained the case, and it's really something. So,
That's wonderful. Kol HaKavod.
Alan, it has constitutional principles in it.
Oh, wonderful.
But it was so great because it's exactly what she changed careers to do.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful to have that kind of satisfaction and impact in one's work. That's wonderful. And how many lawyers do we have here tonight? Because I know we have some people here to speak, to hear Alan speak. Yes. All right, what else are we celebrating this evening? Yes, Aline. Oh my, learner's permit, yeah. Should we stay off the roads or no? Okay, all right. Yes, Renee.
My anniversary is on the 2nd.
Happy anniversary, wonderful. Yes, Lisa.
I finally got a picture of my 2 grandchildren that live in Florida, so now I have all 3 grandchildren in my phone.
Yay, pictures of grandchildren. All right, yes, Lori, and then Bill.
Our youngest son just came home, finished his freshman year in college at the University of Delaware, and had a great year
Yay,
last night.
yay, go Blue Hens. Yay. Bill?
The next Tuesday, Janine and I will celebrate 31 years of marriage.
31 years of marriage. Mazal tov. Hey, let's be nice. I like to ask instead, how do you, I used to ask people, do you still like each other? But I never wanted, you don't ask a question you don't want the answer to. So I always want to know if people have a secret or advice for people.
To always respect and hear your spouse's perspective.
Wonderful. Janine, do you want to add anything to that?
As long as he says, you're right, you're right, you're right.
Yes,
I'd
yes.
like to say happy birthday to Barb and Julie, who have birthdays at the end of the week.
Oh, wonderful. Happy birthday.
Also 31.
Also 31. Yeah. Yeah. And we are also celebrating, and we're celebrating on multiple levels. Sierra's bat mitzvah is this Shabbat. Raise your hand if you're here with Sierra's family. Yay! And this is actually very momentous for us because between COVID and other logistical challenges of having your entire family come into town from out of town, this is the first time we've had B'nai Mitzvah family here on Friday night in a while. So it's really a blessing for all of us to be able to celebrate with you. I know a lot of you will be back in the morning to celebrate with Sierra, but it's nice that we get to partake of your joy, even if this is the only time we're coming this Shabbat. So, so do we have anything else that we're celebrating? Yes, Merle.
I'm glad Gary is here. We had the opportunity to visit the Rosenbach Museum.
Oh, yes.
And actually touch a Hebrew Bible that was printed in the 1400s.
That's amazing. That's really incredible. Yeah. And I was sorry to miss that, but I'm glad everybody had such a good time, and I'm hoping to someday go and see all those cool books myself. Wonderful. All right. Well, another thing I wanted to share is that as of this week, for I believe the next 10 weeks, my Divrei Torah for the Book of Numbers are going to be on the URJ, on the Reform Judaism website. So, for instance, I'm not giving a sermon this evening, but if you miss hearing my sermons, there is one on reformjudaism.org this week. So that was a very great honor, and it's been a very interesting process, and I've been getting some help from some of my early readers, one of which is Merle. And so I'm very excited about that. We are going to hear from Alan at the end of the service, so we're going to continue with Aleinu on page 586. We rise in body and in spirit.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגר עלינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר ארץ, ומשה בקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובלי מרומי, הוא אלוהינו אלוה, אמת מלכנו וחסודתו, כה כתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום וחשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, והארץ מתחת אין עוד.
May we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding. Loved each of us for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds exceed our speech, and may we never lift up our hands but to conquer fear and doubt and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, excuse me, over all humanity. Cause light to go forth over all the lands between the seas, and light up the universe with the joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace.
ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
You may be seated. Page 594. It is a fearful thing to love what death can touch. A fearful thing to love, hope, dream, to be, and oh, to lose. A thing for fools this, and a holy thing to love. For your life has lived in me, your laugh once lifted me, your word was gift to me. To remember this brings a painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, and a holy thing to love what death has touched. This week we mourn the recent passing of Louise Gratz, friend of Merle Salkin. We are also observing the yahrzeit of Marion Ruth Abrams, sister of Jeffrey Abrams. Herbert M. Barrett, beloved member of our congregation. Jack Horowitz, grandfather of Ellen Horowitz-Matz. Moshe Joseph, father of Orly Marivenkin. Benson Krieger, uncle of Jennifer Streitwieser. Beverly Landau, mother of Lisa Landau. Claire Miller, mother of Howard Miller. Erwin Natov, brother-in-law of Natalie Dian. And Irving Schwartz, uncle of Joel Schwartz. If you'd like to add a name to this list, please do so now. Mourner's Kaddish can be found on page 598. We rise in body and in spirit. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, Be'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chaye echon u'b'yom echon u'b'chaye d'chol Beit Yisrael, b'gala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shemei Rabbah mivarach le'olam olmei almaya, yibarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudesha brichu, La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, ta'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated. We're going to turn to page 122. We invite up Sierra and her parents to lead us in the prayer before Kiddush. And Sayana, would you mind bringing the challah from the back table forward? This one is purely symbolic. I want them to be able to eat something. So you're going to read right there in English. Yeah.
The heaven and the earth were finished, and all their array. On the seventh day God finished the work that God had been doing. And God ceased on the seventh day from all the work that God had done. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because on it God ceased from all the work of creation that God had done.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratavanu, v'shabbat kodsho v'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reshit, ki hu yom tehillah l'mikra'e kodesh, zecher yitziat Mitzrayim. Kiranu b'charta, v'chtanu ki Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh HaShabbat.
If you're okay with that. All right. And now you can pick up a piece of challah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz b'tei avon.
Mazel tov. And as you can hear, Sierra has a wonderful voice, so we're very excited to have her lead services in the morning, and I hope people will come back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Feel free to take some challah back to your seats if you'd like. It's actually a very exciting week of simchas for our congregation because we have Sierra's bat mitzvah tomorrow morning at our Shabbat service at 10 a.m. On Thursday, the 25th at 7 p.m., we have our first in-person confirmation since 2019. And our 2021 students happen to all be back in town. One of them was already off at college. Are back in town, and they're going to come and have their formal picture taken, which is just really closing a loop on a lot of our COVID simchas. So that is something that we are very much looking forward to. Anything else going on we need to announce? No. All right. Well, stay tuned after our closing prayers for our tag talk, our Torah, Avodah, Gemilut Chasadim talk with Alan Gershenson. And what shall we sing as a closing song?
Let's go to page 625. Adon Olam, Hashem Malach, בטרם כל יציר נברא, לעת נשא וחפשו כל, אזי מלך שמו נקרא, ואחרי כיכות הכל, לבדו ימלוך נורא, והוא היה, והוא הווה, והוא יהיה בתפארה, והוא אחד ואין שני, להמשיך לו להכבירה, בלי ראשית, בלי תכלית, ולא העוז והמזרח, והוא אלי וחי גולי, בצור חבלי בעת צרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנת כוסים ביום אקרא, בידו הפקיד רוחי, בעת תישן ועירה, ועם רוחי גביעתי, אדון אלי ולא אירא, אדון עולם אשר מלך, בטרם כל יציר נברא, לעת נשא וחפשו כל, אזי מלך שמו נקרא, אדון עולם אשר מלך, בטרם כל יציר נברא, לעת נשא וחפשו כל, אזי מלך שמו נקרא.
Baruch atem bevo'echem, baruch atem b'tzeitchem. Blessed were you when you came into the house of God. Blessed may you be as you go forth. God, we are so grateful for this opportunity to be together and to celebrate Shabbat with one another and to learn from one another. And we pray that our time together will strengthen us and give us clarity and discernment so that we can go forth in pursuit of justice and fairness in the coming days. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. May God bless you and protect you. May God's countenance shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May God turn to you in blessing. May God turn to you in blessing and give you peace. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Hey.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Hey, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom.
Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. We have a treat tonight in that we have a tag talk, our version of the TED Talk, patent pending, which is Torah, Avodah, Gemilut Chasadim, learning, service, and acts of loving kindness. And tonight we have Alan Gershenson with us. He has had a wonderful career as a commercial litigator, and in his next act, how many? I don't know how many acts this is. Is this 2? Is this 3? He has been teaching adult education courses on legal subjects, particularly on constitutional law and religion, and we're going to hear a little bit about that this evening. And also, most importantly, is married to Elaine for how many years now? 54, triple chai.
That's a nice Jewish number.
It is a nice Jewish number. So we are excited to hear from him this evening. Just make sure you stay nice and close to the mic
Okay,
so people can hear.
all right. People have never had trouble hearing me.
People at home might have trouble hearing.
Yeah. When Linda George first called me to invite me to speak, my first thought was, what am I going to talk about that could be interesting from my experience in talking in 15 minutes? I was a commercial litigator for 42 years, but what I did was really, frankly, kind of boring. But, I made a nice living at it. But then it occurred to me, I've actually had an interesting journey, which I'll tell you about. And by the way, Linda, I hope you're watching us from home tonight, and I hope you're feeling better. The journey started in high school. I had always been upset as a teenager growing up in high school and junior high and high school. Back then in Pennsylvania and elsewhere, there was a law that mandated the reading of 10 verses from the Bible every day in public school. And what bothered me was I went to a school that was about maybe 20% Jewish. Not Abington, by the way, which will become important in a moment. And they had a propensity to read at least 50% of the time from the New Testament. And that bothered me, and it particularly bothered me when they read a particular portion of the New Testament that went something like, and it was from Corinthians, and it went something like, and Jesus said, "Thou shalt not pray in the synagogues like the hypocrites do." And they would read that like, I think more than any other verse that they read. So it really bothered me. Around that time, I was a junior in high school. A very brave, for the time, very brave family of atheists, actually, in Abington, which is why I said I wasn't in Abington in high school, brought a lawsuit challenging that statute. And as it made its way through the courts, there was a lower court decision that said, well, the statute's constitutional as long as students are allowed to not participate. And that lower court decision actually was reported in the media and the press, and I remember there was a headline in the Inquirer. So the next day, as it turned out, or a couple, maybe shortly thereafter, as it turned out, they announced they were going to read that particularly offensive thing from Corinthians. And I raised my hand in homeroom and said, "Excuse me, I'd like to leave." And of course, my teacher said, "You sit down or it's detention." Unfortunately, I knew that my parents were not as brave as the Shemps, and they would not have stood behind me, so I sat down. That case made its way to the Supreme Court, and in 1963, in Shemp versus Abington School District, the Supreme Court held that statute unconstitutional, as an unconstitutional establishment of religion. Now, you may or may not know, in the First Amendment to the Constitution, there's two phrases dealing with religion. One that says the state shall not establish religion, and the other which says the state shall not abridge the rights of people to free exercise of religion. And what's become interesting now is in some contexts, the struggle between those two, as I'll talk about in a minute. So that happened to me in high school. In college, I was taking a undergraduate level course in constitutional law, and one of the cases we read was a case called Braunfield versus Brown, in which the Supreme Court, in an opinion written by Justice Frankfurter, which is kind of interesting because he was the lone Jew on the Jewish justice at the time, ruled that the blue laws in the state of Massachusetts were constitutional, that they did not abridge the right of either establishment of religion or freedom of religion. That case had been brought by some Jewish merchants who said that the blue laws abridged their freedoms because if they had to close on Saturday, they could only be, if they had to close on Sunday, they could only be open 5 days a week, whereas the Christians could be open 6 days a week, and it put them at a disadvantage. And the Supreme Court, as I said, in a decision by Justice Frankfurter, said, no, the state has a right to, it's a health law, really, is what they said, and they have the right to declare that there shall be a day of rest, and which day it shall be. Interesting aside, when Justice Frankfurter was appointed to the Supreme Court by Franklin Roosevelt, there was an outcry amongst some congressmen or senators, I guess, that he was appointing that commie Jew from Harvard. Turned out that Justice Frankfurter was ended up being the most conservative justice on the court in the Warren Court, at least late Warren Court in the 60s. At the same time, Franklin Roosevelt also appointed a man named Hugo Black to the Supreme Court. Hugo Black ended up being one of the most liberal justices on the court, even though he had been a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Since he was a senator from Alabama at the time, politically it behooved him to do so, and when he got to the Supreme Court and didn't have to worry about getting elected anymore, his true colors came out. Nowadays, they vet them so well that it couldn't happen. This kind of thing isn't happening. Everybody knew that the Trump appointees were not going to turn out to be closet liberals. But back then it happened. It actually happened. Anyway, so I had those two experiences in high school and college that sort of partially influenced my decision to go to law school. So I went to law school, and then after graduating from law school, I ended up not doing something that I really would have loved, but rather doing what was practical and monetarily practical and making a living. And so I practiced commercial litigation for 42 years. But then I retired almost 10 years now, 10 years ago. And I've been teaching courses on legal-related subjects, things that I'm really interested in. And to complete a full circle, I teach every year at a place called Chautauqua in New York, and I usually teach a 5-hour course. It's an hour a day for 5 days. And in the summer of 2021, I had to propose my course for the following summer. And I realized that the Supreme Court was going to have before it in that session a very important decision on freedom of religion. So I put out a proposal to teach a course on religion and the Constitution, so as to encompass both establishment and freedom of religion. And last summer, in fact, I did teach that course, and of course the Supreme Court did render that important decision, which I'll talk about. The decision that I knew was coming up, and which in fact was decided last June, was the case, I'm sure you all read about it, about the football coach who decided he wanted the football coach of a public high school football team, decided he was going to pray at the end of every game on the 50-yard line. And the school district, after warning him several times, fired him, and he sued, saying that his freedom of religion was unconstitutionally impacted by a public body, the school district. The case is called Kennedy versus Bremerton School District, if anyone is interested. But again, that case really shows the conflict between the non-establishment provision and the freedom of religion provision. Because the school district says we can't allow this because it's an establishment of religion. And their argument was that to allow it would be making it look like we endorsed what he was doing, since he's an employee. And so that was the argument that the school district made when they defended the lawsuit in court, which turned out, I think, to be something of a mistake. The Supreme Court's conservative majority, and again, it was the usual or often 6-3 decision, reversed the firing, said you can't do that, it impinges on his freedom of religion. And if you read the majority opinion and then the dissenting opinion, it's really very fact-oriented. And the two sets of justices, just saw it differently because they saw both sides. They saw what they wanted to see in the facts. And they emphasized different things. Now, since the decision, both sides, on the one hand, liberals, and on the other hand, were conservatives, both the liberals being very fearful where the Supreme Court might be going on this subject. And the conservatives, on the other hand, thinking, aha, we can do anything now. And having read the opinion several times, I disagree. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think the majority in the court, I think they just wanted to make a point, and in particular because they had felt the cases on establishment of religion after the Bible reading case, but for many years, had gone much too far afield in preventing governmental entities from doing anything that breached the wall of separation. And so I think they wanted to make that point. But I don't know that it's going to go much further. And we'll know soon, probably. Because, as I said, the conservatives think that this was really great stuff. And in fact, I just read about 2 weeks ago, the legislature in Texas is considering a law which would mandate the posting of the Ten Commandments in every classroom in the state and, again, require Bible reading. And require reading from the Bible again, which, if contested, would reverse Shemp versus Abington Township. If you read the opinions in the football coach case, though, really what the majority emphasized, and I think I referred to the fact that I thought the school district handled it wrong, because the school district was based on some prior precedents. They were basing their actions on, they didn't want it look like they endorsed this because it would violate establishment of religion. What the Supreme Court majority said, nah, it's not endorsement. The key thing is coercion. And there was nothing formally in the record of the lower court that showed that any student felt coerced to participate in this prayer thing by the coach. Although according to the dissent, there apparently was some reference to it somewhere that some parents were in fact upset, but the school district really didn't bring that into the record formally. I think, reading the opinions, if instead of the school district, if what had happened is instead of the school district firing the coach, some students and parents had brought an action against the school district saying they were coerced by this coach implicitly because their sons felt that if they were going to succeed on the football team, they had to follow the coach if they were going to, be given the same opportunities. If that had been the procedural posture, where with a parent suing the school district, I think the result would have been different. Because the majority emphasized this coercion thing. And since the school district didn't go there with their presentation, I think that may have made the difference. We'll see if I'm right, if laws like what is being proposed in Texas happen, because obviously if there's now a law in Texas or elsewhere that says, again, that Bible reading is mandated, that of course is coercion. If it's mandated. And so we will see. Hi. Yes, Alan.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
About sort of the First Amendment and not as much the establishment. First, it's so exciting that some of your
Oh, stop, Alan.
go
Stop
over
it.
these issues in a way that, many of us, even those who've been lawyers for a while, will not understand. So is there a move in the court, which according to the book I read, 8 of the 9 justices are Catholic, although one's not practicing?
No, it's not. That's not true. 2 of them are Jewish.
Which two?
One, Wakagan and Breyer retired. There were 3. There were 3. It was Breyer, Kagan, and Ginsburg. Oh, okay. But I don't think it's 8, but maybe. Anyway, I think one of them's a Protestant, at least. Oh, okay. All right. Anyway.
So with that, the question is not as much establishment, but the question that I thought the legal issue was the practice of religion, and does that give a body the right to, in the practice of their religion, squash other things that we thought were rights to begin with? For example, the instance, the 2 cases had to do with sort of, a person being fired by a church because they were pregnant and they didn't like the way it, it looked for their church or for their people to have let's say she wasn't married, I don't really remember the rules on it. And so what they were able to do was, using the sword of religion, be able to quash, with the support of the Supreme Court, rights that we ordinarily have.
Well,
so the right to worship trumps.
Well, first, a couple things on that. First of all, the Constitution only applies to state action, only applies to governmental action. So a church or even a private employer is free, is not prohibited by the Constitution from doing anything. There may be violations of some civil rights statutes that say you can't discriminate against somebody based on their religion. And that would be a different issue. That would not be a constitutional issue. It would be an issue of whether or not it violates the statute. But certainly a church can do, they, and I think the civil rights laws have exceptions for churches anyway, at least in some circumstances. A more interesting case that's coming up, and actually has come up in the Supreme Court a couple of years ago, put it back, and it's coming up again, is the original case was the baker's case in Colorado, where the baker refused to bake a cake for the wedding of a gay couple. And in Colorado found that violated their anti-discrimination law, not constitutional law, but violated their anti-discrimination law. And so the question, it's really still not resolved, is does the right to free exercise of religion in that context trump those laws that are against people who want to exercise their religion by not performing services for certain groups. So that is out there. And the Supreme Court has, it's somewhat different, but the Supreme Court has over the years allowed infringement, if you will, of freedom of religion in certain contexts. The very first freedom of religion case was called Reynolds versus United States, and it was in 1870 something. And that involved a high executive of the Mormon Church, which at the time not only allowed but supposedly mandated polygamy. And the question was whether or not at the time Utah was it was still a territory, it wasn't a state yet, and whether or not the federal government could prevent polygamy in the territories. And the Supreme Court back in the 1870s said no. Or yes, the federal government can do that. And the polygamy was, the anti-polygamy statute was upheld. And there have been a lot of cases like that. Indians using peyote in their religious practices is another one. There have been a number of them. And the law is still is unsettled, and it seems to be changing a little bit. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, Rabbi.
I was curious if you've been following the book bans, if that falls into your area.
Well, that I taught the year before. I taught the freedom of religion, the religion thing. I taught freedom of speech. So yes, it was. Of course, they really weren't doing the book bans as much then. That was like 3 years ago. That will be interesting because I think those book bans do violate certain earlier Supreme Court cases, and whether this Supreme Court will overrule those decisions, I don't know. The key one was in the mid-1960s, a case involving the banning in Massachusetts of Fanny Hill. And the Supreme Court in the 1960s held that was an unconstitutional infringement of freedom of speech. On the other hand, when you're dealing with children in schools and school libraries, the states allowed a little more leeway than if you ban the book, say, from public library generally, as opposed to a high school library, for example. Joe.
Would you clarify what the coercion was that the school district or the school was arguing was going on, and the reason why they fired?
The school district did not argue the coercion point. I'm saying if they had, if they had proved it, I think the decision might have been different. The school district, that's why I say I think they blew it. The school district argued they fired him because his conduct, they said, constituted an endorsement by the district because he was an employee. It was an endorsement of a particular religion that violated establishment of religion. That was their argument. And the Supreme Court said, no, that's not the standard. The standard should be coercion. And they overruled a lot of prior cases that said, no, the standard was the endorsement standard. And I think if the school district had found some parents who said their kids were implicitly coerced by the action, because, particularly if there was somebody like on the football team who said, I thought that if I didn't participate, I would be penalized, I think the result might have been different. They didn't make that argument.
I remember at the time that the argument about the emotional effect on other members of the team or other members of the student body, that was indeed made. I think
It was not really made. The dissenting opinions said it was implicitly the case, but the case was brought against this because the school district fired him. No parents were parties to the case. No students were parties to the case, and the school district didn't really argue that.
So I'm gonna suggest that we continue our conversation over Oneg, and I want to say a big thank you to Alan. Also, to Linda George for organizing this, who I also hope is watching at home. Shabbat Shalom, please join us, and we have some challah as well.